I want to be clear about something before I get into this. I'm not a person who nurses old wounds for sport. I don't think much of people who spend their whole lives pointing backward at everything that went wrong and using it as an excuse to stop moving forward. I was raised to believe in giving people grace, and I do, genuinely, but there's a particular kind of experience that I've been trying to find language for. The kind where the wound isn't a single blow but an accumulation. Quiet, constant, delivered without malice sometimes, and maybe that's the part that makes it hardest to name. Because if someone is cruel to you on purpose, you can point to it. When they just consistently forget to include you. When you are the thing that slips through the cracks over and over. When you start to understand that you have been the afterthought for so long it's become the arrangement. What do you call that? I'm still figuring out what to call it, but I know what it felt like to live inside it. My name is Hadley Croft. I grew up in Millfield, Ohio, which is a small town in Perry County that most people outside the state have never heard of. My parents, Kurt and Joyce, were the kind of people who volunteered for things. My dad coached youth basketball at the rec center for 6 years. My mom ran the spring fundraiser at our elementary school every year and made the best snickerdoodles in the county, which she would tell you herself without much prompting. From the outside, we were a family that had things together. Neat yard. Regular church attendance. Nothing for the neighbors to talk about. I have a sister named Brooke. She's 3 years younger than me, and she started taking dance classes when she was 4 years old, and by the time she was 9 it was clear she was exceptional. Not good for a kid. Actually exceptional. The kind of exceptional that earns you a studio's top slot and invitations to competitions in cities 2 hours away. And a certain kind of parental devotion that burns bright and constant. I am not saying this to diminish her. What Brooke did with dance took years of real work, and I respect that. But the effect in our house was that my parents had a project. A bright and beautiful and visible project, and they poured into it the way you pour into something you believe in with your whole self. They drove her to practice 4 nights a week. They sewed her costumes by hand on the kitchen table. They took off work to attend competitions. They bought pointe shoes and warm-up gear and registration fees, with a cheerful willingness I never once saw, applied to anything I was doing. I was the other one, the one who made things easy. I figured out early that if I needed something, a library book, a ride to a practice set, someone to look at my essay, I needed to figure it out myself. The well of attention in our house had a very specific gravity and it pulled toward Brooke alwaysies, and I could either stand at the edge feeling the absence, or I could learn to carry a bucket of my own. I learned to carry the bucket. I was 14 when I finished a science project I'd stayed up until midnight completing. A cross-sectioned model of the human heart built from craft foam and paint, detailed enough that my biology teacher displayed it in the school hallway for the rest of the semester. I carried it home and set it on the kitchen counter and waited. My mom came in, glanced at it, said, "Oh, that's neat, honey," and then asked if I'd seen the video Brooke's studio had uploaded of her new solo routine. I watched the video. Brooke was really good. I'm not being sarcastic. She genuinely was. But I thought about my heart sitting on the counter, and I remember the exact thought. What would it take? What would it actually take to get the version of them they were giving her? I never found out. At some point I stopped trying to. By 15 I was working weekends at the IGA on Route 40. Bagging groceries and stocking shelves for $9 an hour. I told my parents I was saving for a car. That was true. But the deeper truth was that I'd already done the math on what was coming, and I understood that college was going to be something I solved for myself, the same way I'd solved everything else. I put every paycheck, minus a little for gas, into a savings account I'd opened on my own, at the credit union on Main Street. I took every AP course my high school offered. I drove myself to the ACT on a Saturday morning in a car I borrowed from a friend's older brother, because I didn't want to ask my parents to rearrange anything. I got a 31. I didn't tell them right away. I think I already knew it wouldn't get the reaction I needed, and I wasn't ready to confirm that yet. I applied to colleges the fall of my senior year, using school computers during free period, because I didn't know how to navigate the FAFSA, and was embarrassed to ask my parents for their tax documents, and have to explain what the form even was. I figured it out with help from my guidance counselor, Miss Hargrove, who had a sticker on her office door that said, "First Gen, come in." I knocked on that door, and she sat with me for 2 hours, and we got the applications in together. I got into Ohio University. Partial academic scholarship. When I told my parents over dinner, my dad said, OU. Well, that's decent, and went back to his food. My mom asked if I'd considered Columbus State, which was closer. She said it might be nice to have me nearby. I noted privately that Brooke would still be at home for 3 more years. The notion of having me nearby had never come up before, and I didn't think it was actually about that. Nobody asked what I was going to study. Nobody asked how I planned to cover the rest of tuition. I did both of those things myself. Pre-health sciences, and a combination of the Pell Grant, work-study hours in the biology department, my savings from the IGA, and a restaurant job I picked up the summer before I left. My grandmother, my dad's mother, Grandma Elaine, who lived in a small house in Caldwell and had the warmest voice of anyone I've ever known, cried when I told her. Not politely. Actually cried. She said, "Tell me everything. Tell me exactly what you're going to study and why." And I talked for 30 minutes, every part of the plan I'd built in my head, and she asked follow-up questions. She asked questions I hadn't even thought to ask myself. She said she was proud of me in a way that meant something, because she demonstrated it in how hard she listened. I talked to Grandma Elaine every Sunday through all 4 years of college. She was the constant. By junior year, I'd spent 2 semesters volunteering at a free clinic in Athens, logging clinical hours with the same obsessive care other people gave to their social lives. I'd found my direction. Physician assistant. The acceptance rates at accredited PA programs are brutal, some programs in the low single digits, and I spent the better part of a year building my application. Personal statement drafts that I rewrote 11 times. Reference letters from my supervising clinician, and 2 professors who knew my work. A spreadsheet accounting for every clinical hour I'd ever logged. I submitted in the first wave of the application cycle, because I knew enough to know the early applicants had the edge. I called home to tell my mom I was applying. She said, "Pia, is that like a nurse practitioner?" I explained the difference carefully. She said, "Well, I hope you get in somewhere." Then she mentioned that Brooks Studio had been selected to perform at a regional showcase in Pittsburgh, and wasn't it exciting? I agreed that it was. She spent the next 10 minutes on the details of the Pittsburgh trip. The acceptance letter from Ohio State's PA program came on a Thursday afternoon in October. Full funding, a monthly stipend, a ranked program. I found out standing in the parking lot of the clinic where I'd been volunteering, staring at my phone as the sun turned everything amber, in that particular way it does when the air gets cold and clear. I called Grandma Elaine. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Grandma, I got in." She made a sound I have never heard from another human being, a sharp exhale that turned into something that wasn't quite a word, and then she said, "Oh, Hadley, oh, sweetheart. I knew it. I have known it since you called me freshman year and explained what a PA was and why you wanted to be one. I knew it then." I let myself cry, just for a minute. Then I straightened up, because there was a shift starting in 40 minutes and the parking lot was not the right place. I did call my parents. My mom said, "Ohio State, that's a good school." My dad said Columbus was a far drive. I said it was 2.5 hours. He said, "Well, keep us posted." That was the whole conversation. My undergraduate graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in mid-May. I sent my parents the date, time, and building name in a text message in February. I mentioned it on the phone in March. I confirmed it again in April, framed casually inside a longer conversation, because I didn't want to seem like I was asking for something. The night before, my mom called. She had the voice she uses when she has already made her peace with a decision, and needs me to make peace with it, quickly too. She explained that Brooks' Spring Dance Showcase had been scheduled for that same Saturday afternoon, and they purchased their tickets months ago, and they couldn't leave Brooke without anyone in the audience, because it was her first year in the advanced performance track, and it really meant a lot to her. And they were truly sorry, and so proud of me, and could they take me to dinner sometime to celebrate properly? I said I understood. I said okay. I hung up. I sat on my futon, secondhand, purchased freshman year, held together fine, and looked at the carpet and did the math in my head. 4 years, a 3.87 cumulative GPA, a full scholarship to one of the harder professional programs in the state, and I was worth less, in the final calculation, than a seat in an auditorium at a dance showcase that Brooke had performed in some version, every spring since she was 9 years old. I packed my cap and gown into my bag. I set my alarm. I went to sleep. I walked across the stage at the Convocation Center the next morning, with 800 other graduates, and there was no one in any of the rows who was there for me. I shook a hand and accepted a folder with my name on it, and walked off the other side into the crowd. I found my old roommate Sasha in the lobby. She had graduated a semester early, but she drove 2 hours back to stand in that lobby and hand me a cupcake from the bakery on Court Street, with a tiny plastic graduation cap pressed into the frosting. "You did it," she said. "I mean it, you actually did it." I stood in my shoes in that lobby and ate the cupcake and thought, this is the moment, right here. This cupcake in this lobby with this person who drove 2 hours. This is the whole thing. That evening, my dad's sister posted photos on Facebook. I wasn't watching her page, but Sasha sent me a screenshot. My parents, Kurt and Joyce Croft, seated in the second row of a dance showcase auditorium, holding a bouquet of pink tulips. The timestamp on the photo read 2:17 in the afternoon. My mom's face was open and beaming in a way I recognized from years of watching her watch Brooke perform. I archived the image. I didn't post it anywhere, didn't send it to anyone, didn't text my parents about it. I just needed it to exist somewhere I could look at it. Proof that I had not misread the arithmetic of my family. I moved to Columbus in late July. A studio apartment off Indianola Avenue, $720 a month, which fit inside the stipend if I was careful. I thrifted most of the furniture. I bought a used bike at an estate sale for $15 and used it to commute when the weather held. The program started in August, and within 2 weeks I understood it was going to ask everything I had. And I gave it everything I had, and for the first time in a long time that exchange felt fair. I didn't talk about my family. Partly conservation, I needed every available unit of mental energy for anatomy and pharmacology and clinical ethics. Partly because I didn't yet know how to say the true thing. I'd spent so many years editing it into something manageable. We're not super close, we're just different. It's fine. November of my first year, I got a message from the financial aid office asking me to come in. I went in expecting an administrative issue, something routine. My aid advisor, Ms. Whitaker, is a patient and matter-of-fact woman who I've come to respect a great deal. She showed me a flagged discrepancy. My parents had filed their federal taxes the previous April and had claimed me as a dependent. I was 23 years old. I had been financially independent for 4 years. My own lease, my own health insurance through the university, my own checking account that I had opened when I was 19 and which my parents had never had access to. I had not lived in their home since the summer before my sophomore year of undergrad. I did not meet the IRS definition of a qualifying relative or qualifying child by any measure I could identify. And yet, there it was, their signatures on the form. The claim had triggered a review of my independent student status, which was the foundation of a substantial portion of my funding package. If the claim held, we were talking about thousands of dollars in jeopardized aid. We were talking about my ability to finish the program. Ms. Whitaker walked me through what I'd need to gather. Lease agreements going back several years, bank statements, pay stubs, proof of insurance, a letter from Ohio University confirming my independent status during undergrad. She said these cases were more common than most people realized. She said the documentation process was intensive, but the outcome generally favored the student if the facts were on their side. And they are, she said, on your side. I thanked her. I walked out into the hallway and stood against the wall for a full minute, just breathing. Then I called Grandma, Elaine. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, then she said very carefully, very clearly, "Hadley, don't you let them take one more thing from you. Not one more thing." I didn't. I spent the next 8 weeks gathering documentation every evening and on weekends while keeping up with coursework during the day. Phone calls to my old bank branch. Faxed copies of utility bills from 3 different addresses. A notarized affidavit laying out my financial independence year by year, going back to 19. A 2-page letter from Ohio University's financial aid office. I returned to Ms. Whitaker's office twice with organized folders and a written timeline. I was methodical in the way you become methodical when the stakes are too high for anything less. The correction was made in February. My aid package was restored in full. My parents received an amended notice from the IRS. My dad called once afterward. He did not say he was sorry. He said their accountant had made an assumption. That they hadn't understood the filing would cause any kind of problem, that it was all handled now, and he hoped there were no hard feelings. There aren't, I told him. I meant something different than he heard. First year ended. I passed everything. Clinical rotations began in the fall. Family medicine, then emergency, then pediatrics, and doing that actual work rearranged something in my chest. I would come home after a 12-hour shift in the ED, too tired to form coherent sentences and feel more like myself than I had going in. The exhaustion had texture to it. It had meaning. I had spent my whole life learning to be useful in a house where usefulness went unacknowledged, and here was a place where being useful mattered in ways I could see and measure and touch. I started writing things down in the evenings. Not for anyone to read. Just because the stories needed somewhere to go that wasn't my own head. My roommate Sasha had given me a nice notebook when first year ended, and I filled it. The parking lot in Athens where I read the acceptance email, the cupcake in the lobby, Ms. Whitaker's office and the filed form with my parents' signatures, Grandma Elaine saying not one more thing, the gap where applause should have been. One night I posted a single paragraph from the notebook on a forum for first-generation graduate students, half expecting nothing. 30 responses came in within the first hour. People saying this is my life exactly. People who had walked at graduation with no one in the stands, and driven home to an empty apartment, and made pasta and gone to bed. People who'd had to explain to their parents what a board exam was. People who had eaten entire milestones alone and quietly, and kept going because there was nothing else to do but keep going. Someone wrote, I thought I was the only one who celebrated in their car. Someone else wrote, this is the first time I've seen it described accurately. We talked to each other. We kept talking. That was something I hadn't expected to find, and it turned out to be a lot. I heard from Brooke last spring. She lives in Columbus now. Works in arts administration for a dance company downtown, which suits her in a way I can recognize even from a distance. We got coffee at a place near her office. It was awkward at first, the kind of awkward that happens between two people who both know a truth that has never been spoken between them directly. After about 20 minutes, she set her cup down and said, I need to say something. I knew they weren't going to your graduation. I knew a week before they told you. I didn't call you. I've thought about that a lot. I told her that wasn't on her. I meant it. She was 20 years old, and living in their house, operating inside the same system I had grown up navigating, and she hadn't designed that system any more than I had. She said, I sent you the screenshot, the one from our aunt's page. I hadn't known that. I had never known who sent it. I looked at her across that table. This person I grew up with in the same house and barely knew at all, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for a very long time. Not forgiveness exactly, or not only that, something quieter. She isn't them. She's someone who got handed the same family I did, and a different share of what was available inside it. And she's been carrying her own version of that weight since she was old enough to understand what she was holding. We text now, carefully, genuinely. We're figuring out what we are to each other from a starting point of honesty, which is the only kind of starting point I have any use for anymore. I'm 26. I passed my boards on the first attempt. I work at an outpatient internal medicine clinic on the east side of Columbus, 4 days a week. Doing the work I spent years building toward, patient care, follow-ups, the slow and sometimes heartbreaking and sometimes quietly triumphant work of helping people manage their health across time. I have an apartment with a real couch, 2 snake plants on the windowsill that have survived 2 winters, a bookshelf I assembled from a flat-pack kit and am unreasonably proud of, a framed photo on my dresser of me and Grandma Elaine at Christmas 2 years ago, taken 20 minutes, after I told her I had matched to my top clinical rotation site. She is 81 now, and still calls every Sunday. She always says, tell me something good. I always can. My parents and I speak occasionally. The conversations are brief and surface level, like touching something fragile to see if it still holds. They sent a card when I passed my boards, a generic one, CVS probably, signed with both their names and no message inside. I put it in a drawer. I don't know if we will ever find our way to something real. I'm not closing the door. But I am not standing in the hallway on the other side of it waiting for them to open it, either. The version of them that says what I know they know, I'm not organizing my life around whether or not they show up. What I want to say to you, and I mean you specifically, whoever you are reading this at whatever hour you've found a quiet minute in, is that the part nobody prepares you for isn't the leaving. Leaving is a decision, or a series of small decisions that accumulate into distance. The part nobody tells you about is what comes after. The strange, specific work of figuring out who you actually are, once you're out of the house that told you who to be. Because you will have spent so long being the one who manages, who adjusts, who makes themselves smaller so others can be more comfortable, and then one day, you'll be somewhere. A clinic hallway, a parking lot, a coffee shop, across from someone who finally wants to know the real version. And someone will ask you a simple question about what you want, and for a second you won't know how to answer it. Not because you don't have an answer, because you forgot the question was allowed to be about you. I still catch it in myself. The reaching for permission I don't need. The reflex to minimize what I've done, so someone else doesn't have to work as hard to acknowledge it. Those habits don't disappear on a schedule. I won't promise you they do. But here's what I will promise. You start to notice them. The moment before you make yourself smaller, you feel it coming. And noticing is how you choose differently. I built this life one unglamorous decision at a time. Grocery shifts and free period library sessions and notarized affidavits and nights, in the hallway of a hospital eating a granola bar at midnight, and phone calls to a woman Caldwell who always picked up. Nobody handed me any of it. Nobody cleared the path or made room at the table. I made the room. So can you? I know you can because you're still here. You're still trying to put words to something that resisted language for a long time. Still trying to figure out what you're owed and what you can build without it. That stubbornness, that refusal to disappear even when disappearing would have been easier. That is precisely what it takes. Don't stop.